Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather on the 24th day of April, 2022. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service. Up first, we've gotten the river breakup map. No watches warnings, no flood watches warnings or advisories out. Just some open areas there on the Tanana River. You can see, looks like around Fairbanks and then back toward Delta. And then Copper River has some open areas there. Otherwise, Yukon River, Kuskokwim Rivers, and everywhere else still pretty well iced over. And moving on, no watches, warnings, or advisories out anywhere around the state here for the next day or so. So we look at the hazardous weather graphics, even out in the Aleutians. Get some gale force winds coming into the western central Aleutians with pretty good front coming in on Tuesday. And that's about it, but maybe gusts of 50 miles an hour or so out in those areas where they're pretty used to it. Satellite imagery, you can see a system coming into the western Bering Sea at the front pushing past Shimia. That bringing some 40 to 45 mile an hour wind gusts into Adak and Atka this afternoon with some rain, light rain, not about 1/10 of an inch at Adak, so nothing too terribly heavy. Heavier rainfall appears to be back to the west from Amchitka out towards Shimia and Attu. Otherwise, dry over the eastern Bering Sea. Weakening front over the Panhandle brought some rain today, heaviest over the southern areas, more lighter and showery to the north. For example, about 86 hundredths of an inch fell at Ketchikan. Then you get up to June, only 5 hundredths of an inch fell today there. And then some showers of rain and snow out over the western interior. About 1/10 of an inch of rain and snow fell at Unalakleet and Nome today, with lighter amounts across the western interior from Yukon River there, Yukon Kuskokwim Delta up into the northwest coast. But again, pretty light amounts, some pretty good sunshine breaking out over Kodiak Island this afternoon, as well as up over the interior, central eastern interior, temperatures rising in the 50s to lower 60s during the mid and latter part of the afternoon. Sunday today up over the Yukon Flats, you can see pretty clear skies there. But a lot of clouds along the North Gulf Coast and the Gulf of Alaska with a weakening system that's southeast of Kodiak, main low center. Another weak low right off the south coast there along that frontal boundary. And then the heavier cirrus shield with the system pushing in out to the west. You can see as it pushes eastward there. And looking on the chart today, you can see weak front there bringing the, nearly an inch of rain to some areas of the southern southeast coast in the last 12 hours. Much lighter amounts, as I mentioned, up to the north. And then a weak low pressure over the western part of the state there, just, excuse me, east of the Seward Peninsula, brought some scattered snow showers to the Seward Peninsula. Again, about 1/10 of an inch falling Nome and Unalakleet with lighter amounts elsewhere, but dry and partly sunny. Central and eastern part of the state clearing out over Kodiak Island with northwest winds gusting up to 30 miles an hour at AKwx and about 20 to 25 miles an hour on the southwest coast, with light winds for the Alaska Peninsula, and then the wind and rain with that storm system out to the west pushing eastward to Adak and Atka with the front with some rain. Quite windy conditions back toward the western Aleutians there around the main low center. Tonight that low will lift northward, so the front pushes eastward and weakens as it starts to pull away from the main low center. Look for at least small craft advisories, possibly push into Unamak Island with rain pushing in as well. Rain and wind on the increase to the Pribilof Islands, and a weak trough keeps some snow shower activity going from the western Arctic coast down into the Kuskokwim Delta. Chance of rain and snow showers Kuskokwim Valley to the western Alaska Range, maybe into western Cook Inlet. A very weak trough might kick off a few isolated rain or snow showers over the Kenai Peninsula, Copper River Basin, mostly mountainous terrain there, and maybe the eastern Alaska Range, but dry to the north there to the Arctic coast with variably cloudy skies and some clearing. And rain diminishing, kind of a wet evening and overnight period for the southern, central, southeast coast, with that front washing out, and rainfall amounts will become lighter. And up to the north, just some scattered rain and snow showers there, but dry for the eastern North Gulf Coast for the most part. And then the forecast for Monday, still a chance of moisture showers for the southern panhandle, with the low pressure near the Queen Charlotte Islands, the trough extending northeastward from that center. Dry up over the northern panhandle, some sunshine breaking out. Probably see some sun breaks from the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, Copper River Basin again. Looks to be mostly cloudy, Cook Inlet and Kenai Peninsula, with a chance of some shower activity again, mainly over the mountainous terrain. Partly to mostly sunny, though, for Kodiak Island, with continued northwest wind flow, although weak northwest winds. Then out to the west, that front weakens as it slowly pushes eastward, passes the Pribilofs. Winds no longer a factor with that system. A little breezy out toward the western Aleutians, but look for some periods of light rain to push into the Alaska Peninsula, with some mixed precipitation possibly reaching the southwest coast during the afternoon. And then it looks like some light snow dropping around Arctic high pressure that's off the chart there up over the Arctic. And that's bringing some light snow into the eastern Arctic coast, maybe some flurries as far west as, say, Aliktok. Better chance for Kaktovik and Ugnukaparik, though, but don't look for any big accumulations there. And still some rain and snow showers with the Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound, Selawik Valley area down across the mid-Yukon River Valley, or the lower Yukon River Valley, and into the Denali Park, western Alaska Range, chance of showers. Otherwise, pretty much precipitation free across interior Alaska. And then for the Tuesday outlook, big storm comes up. Next one rolls up to just north of the western Aleutians into the southwest Bering Sea, with 40 to 45 knot gale force winds moving into the Amchitka-Shimia at 2 area there and into the southwest Bering Sea, with minimum gales with the front pushing into the Adak-Atka area. Look for wind and rain to increase once again late in the day for the Fox Islands and the Pribilofs. Otherwise, high pressure ridging along the west coast there in advance of that system. Look for partly sunny skies with light winds and dry conditions for the western part of the state, eastern Bering Sea, maybe even St. Lawrence Island. But a weak trough will bring some chance of light snow eastern Arctic coast down across much of the eastern interior. Rain or snow, showers, depending on your elevation and time of day and latitude there for the eastern interior areas, but a chance of moisture extends all the way down into the central North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, and partly to mostly cloudy, meaning partly to mostly sunny, possibly for south central Alaska, Cook Inlet, and Kodiak Island. Now, risk of a shower maybe along the east side of the island, Chiniak, Marmot Bay. Otherwise, mostly cloudy skies, maybe some afternoon clearing, but more sun for Bristol Bay than there will be for Kodiak Island. And the Panhandle, chance of rain and snow showers, weak trough over the northern Panhandle, mostly dry down to the south. And taking a look at the overnight lows for tonight, single numbers for the Arctic coast and North Slope, working into the teens for the Brooks Range, south of the mountains, though, mid to upper 20s, upper 20s to lower 30s, central interior, with lows mostly in the 20s, all the way out to the southwest coast, St. Lawrence Island, and mid-30s for the Pribilofs, mid to upper 30s for your lows for the central western Aleutians, lower to mid-30s for the Alaska Peninsula, upper 20s to lower 30s, Bristol Bay, lower to mid-30s for south central Alaska and the Copper River Basin, mid-30s for the North Gulf Coast, and upper 30s to lower 40s for the Panhandle. Highs for tomorrow, 40s to lower 50s for the southeast coast, a little cooler over the central and eastern interior, upper 40s to lower 50s for that area, and highs in the teens, mid to upper for the Arctic coast, probably pushing into the 20s to lower 30s over the North Slope, and then south of the Brooks Range, mid-40s to lower 50s. Mid-30s along the southwest coast, near freezing for St. Lawrence Island, and 40s for the Aleutians, near 40 for the Pribilofs, 40s for Bristol Bay, and 45 to 50 south central Alaska, Mananuska-Susitna Valley, Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, and Copper River Basin. Tuesday morning lows shaping up single numbers, but staying above zero for the Arctic coast and North Slope, and in the 20s to lower 30s. Interior part of the state, south of the Alaska Range, mostly in the lower 30s, and mid-30s for Kodiak Island, 30s for the Alaska Peninsula, mid to upper 30s for the Aleutians, and 31 for the Pribilofs, mid-20s for St. Lawrence Island, upper 30s for the Panhandle. Taking a look at highs Tuesday afternoon, 40s to lower 50s for the southeast coast, mostly in the 40s to mid 50s over interior Alaska, central and southern part of the state, and upper 40s for the North Gulf Coast, mid 40s Alaska Peninsula, about 48 for Kodiak State Airport, mid 40s out over the Aleutians, still near freezing St. Lawrence Island, but trying to push 40 there for the Pribilofs, mid to upper teens for the Arctic coast, and in the 20s for the North Slope. Taking a zoomed in shot here for the Panhandle, lows tonight, upper 30s to near 40. And in the lower 30s, inland areas of southern Alaska, except upper 20s there for Bristol Bay. And up to the highs for tomorrow, 40s to near 50, Kodiak Island to Susitna Valley, and upper 40s to lower 50s for the Panhandle, followed by lows Tuesday morning in the 30s. Some areas reaching the upper 20s, like northeast Bristol Bay there, maybe the Copper River Basin, but basically not too bad. And well above freezing for the Panhandle, followed by highs in the 40s to lower 50s, warmest over the southern Panhandle, mid-50s for the Susitna Valley, possibly into the Kenai Peninsula inland areas, as well as the Copper River Basin, lower 50s, and near 50 Kodiak Island.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather, starting the day off with an overkill of IFR up over in interior Alaska, marginal VFR southern Alaska, and the Panhandle. Lots of IFR on the chart here for the Bering Sea to the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. And moving on to the afternoon, things improve in the interior. And looks like mostly marginal VFR with areas of VFR scattered in. Areas of IFR for the North Slope and the Arctic coast. Some IFR along the southwest coast to the Pribilofs, Alaska Peninsula. Marginal VFR for the Aleutians, central Bering Sea, with some VFR to IFR conditions out over the western Aleutians. North Gulf Coast, marginal VFR into the Copper River Basin. Probably be some VFR over the Copper River Basin in the afternoon, like there will be Susitna, Matanuska Valley, Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet. Mostly VFR, Kodiak Island into Bristol Bay in the southern Kuskokwim Valley there in the Auckland Mountains. Marginal VFR, southern three-quarters of the Panhandle. Good VFR about Juneau northward to Skagway over to Yakutat, including Elfin Cove and Haines. And for the Tuesday morning outlook, it looks like IFR for the northern half of the Panhandle, and marginal VFR with some IFR, especially over the northern half of the state to the Arctic coast. IFR for the southwest coast, northern Bering Sea to the Aleutians in the Alaska Peninsula. And for Tuesday afternoon, VFR a little more widespread now from Kodiak Island up into south central Alaska, Matanuska Susitna Valley, looking at a good VFR flying day Tuesday afternoon into Bristol Bay and the Kuskokwim Valley from about the Yukon River. Looks like areas of marginal VFR. There'll be some scattered areas of VFR over the interior, like showing up there for the Noatak Valley and the DeLong Mountain areas. Otherwise, the North Slope and the Arctic coast, mostly marginal with some areas of IFR. Bering Sea, mostly IFR. And the northern Panhandle, same thing, IFR. Southern 2/3 or 3/4 of the southeast coast will be marginal. Anatuvik, IFR tomorrow, becoming marginal in the afternoon. Adigan, lowest conditions AM, becoming marginal in the PM hours. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR at times occasionally, and possible VFR at other times. Same thing for Rainy, mostly marginal VFR, and probably some periods of VFR as well. Windy, areas of or periods of marginal VFR with some times of VFR. Isabel, occasionally marginal. Mentasta, occasionally marginal. Tanita, occasionally marginal, going into a chant here. Portage, occasionally marginal. Chilcoot and White, VFR, finally. And for the freezing levels, central interior, 2,000 to 4,000 feet there, 8,000 feet over the North Gulf Coast areas, and 2,000 to 6,000 feet out west. And for the icing, between 5,000 and 15,000 feet here, southern Alaska, areas of mixed icing possible down into the Panhandle, some elevated threat of some icing for the Brooks Range to the Arctic coast, and also along a band could be some rime icing of the isolated moderate variety from 3,000 to 11,000 feet there across the Bering Sea from extending northwest to southeast, and then some really isolated scattered icing to the west of that over the central Aleutians to Shimmy and Attu. And the jet stream up to 105 knots there coming into the western Aleutians, and then northwest 70 to 90 knots across the eastern Aleutians. And upper level trough there over the Kuskokwim Valley, maybe to the western Alaska range, producing north to northwest winds 60 to 65 knots from the Chukchi Sea down across the Seward Peninsula, and turning northwest there across Bristol Bay, southern Kuskokwim Valley, and the Aleutian Range right across Kodiak Island, and light variable winds for the Panhandle and all of the interior there, eastern central interior, Gulf of Alaska. And taking a look at 9,000 feet, light variable winds over mainland Alaska from the Arctic coast down into the Gulf and including the Panhandle. A little bit of a breeze there across the Aleutian Range out of the northwest, but pretty light winds for the eastern Bering Sea. Stronger winds out west there, 45 to 60 knots over the Aleutians, western Bering Sea. 40 to 45 knot west-southwesterlies there for the western Aleutians. And otherwise light winds interior Alaska with light variable winds over the Gulf into the Panhandle and along the west coast. Moving on to turbulence, pretty smooth conditions with those light wind patterns over mainland Alaska there. Otherwise, light to isolated moderate chop from up surface to 4,000 feet for the western Aleutians to about 8 After the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service with another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining me today are not just one, but two people, both with the last name Stevens, which is even more fun, but no relation. We have Eric Stevens from GINA and George Stevens, who is a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Awesome. And today you guys brought a really cool toy, or I should say tool, with you. It's a sandbox, but why are you guys working on a sandbox?
Well, it's part of our senior design project, and we were approached by AKwx to build this for them. They had a proof of concept that they developed about a year ago, I think, and they wanted a more robust version that they could pack onto a plane and take places, and it's a handy learning tool for kids and adults.
So you're a mechanical engineering student. You've built a traveling sandbox for the experimental program to stimulate competitive research, EPSCoR, and GINA's facilitated this. But why do we need a traveling sandbox?
Well, the prototype was such a big hit that they decided they wanted another one, actually two, that they could that would be easier to travel with, you know, possibly marketable even.
Okay, so this is a traveling sandbox. It's got a lot of bits and pieces and a computer hooked up to it. What is the computer doing with the sand?
The computer actually uses a Kinect sensor to read the topography of the sand or the shape of the sand, and then the computer translates that into information which it projects using a projector onto the sand, showing topographical lines and which is representative of the shape of the sand.
Okay, so this is a live mapping tool?
Yeah. It's interactive. As you're moving your hands through it, it is actively following and changing the lines to fit what you're doing.
That sounds like something I could have in my backyard.
Yep.
It'd be a lot of fun. So you guys had to change the design a little bit to make this more Alaska-fied, right?
Yeah.
Okay, how'd you do that?
Well, the original was made out of basically lumber and Simpson strong tie type stuff, and we rebuilt it to make it lighter and basically more transportable. We can pack it down to a fairly small size, and it can be loaded onto a plane and flown anywhere in the state.
Which you guys did today. And you have plans to take this in other places of Alaska, right?
Yep, we're actually going to be headed down to Homer with it later today.
Okay, very good. Eric, how does this fit into science learning around Alaska?
Well, you know what? I think it is a tool and it is a toy. And it brings out a smile from an 8-year-old and the smile from a 48-year-old with that inner 8-year-old wanting to get out. The sandbox, it's an interactive learning tool that teaches us how topography in the 3 dimensions is related to, say, a 2-dimensional map. More about that later. Just like George was saying, it's got a Kinect sensor, not just for video games anymore. It can sense out the lay of the land there, feeds that information in the computer identifies that, sends a signal to a projector to send topographic lines to map over that lumpy ground. So you get a 3-dimensional topo map out of it. And my favorite thing about it, this is the thing that stops people at the trade show, they stop at your booth and don't leave, is that you run your hand through that sandbox and it responds in real time. It remaps the topography as you get to be Mr. Tectonic Plate Drifter there. You can make things how you want. Well, what if we made a really high mountain here and a low valley there, and the lines adjust to what you did? It's a learning tool because it shows you that connection between these two-dimensional topo lines and what's really out in Alaska. And Alaska's a place with all kinds of topography. You know, we're from the Great Plains, where topo maps tend to be just like blank pieces of paper, but Alaska is particularly gifted in this regard, and this tool helps us, I think, learn more about our state, really.
Absolutely. And so this is going to enhance STEM learning, the science, technology, engineering, and math, in many different locations around Alaska. Then this would be something that kids and teachers can get their hands on.
It sure is. And I mentioned the it's like fly paper at a booth that, or at the Science Potpourri when we had Greg's original version of this sandbox, and that one was made out of scraps of wood, and it was a prototype. But even that one, before it had some of the refinements that George and crew have made for this newer, upscaled, maybe a 2.0 version of the sandbox, even that one was so attractive to people. It just demonstrated that this has potential to be a learning tool, an outreach tool, an education tool that now is portable and can go places in Alaska. Of course, there's only one sandbox, can't be everywhere at once, but hopefully it gets out there, gets the word out about EPSCoR and what science is being done here for Alaskans.
All right, that sounds really interesting, and I can't wait to get my hands in the sand and try this out for myself. We're going to demonstrate this here in our next segment of Alaska Weather Facts, but before we go, we want to remind you that EPSCoR, which is a new acronym for me now, but I'm going to remember this because you can follow them on Facebook and Twitter, and I invite you to do that. Alaska EPSCoR is also something that facilitates science learning at the University of Alaska around the state, and that stands for Experimental Program to Stimulate Competitive Research. So check that out and make sure you tune in tomorrow because we're going to have the next version where we actually get our hands in the sand and check out how this works and demonstrates that topography. So for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and we'll see you again next time.
Okay, looking at sea ice analysis, varying amounts across the northern Bering Sea. They're thinning out as you get in toward the southwest coast, a little heavier in Norton Sound, but still a little bit there in northeast Bristol Bay, but ice-free around the Pribilofs. And for the coastal water forecast, south coast of the Panhandle, outer coastline there, south to southeast or east-southeast winds 15 knots, seas at about 8 feet. And inside waters, inside channels there, the entire area, variable winds 5 to 10 knots with seas running 2 feet or so, except Clarence Strait, maybe up to 7 feet. Then for the north coast of the Panhandle, looking at west-northwest breeze 10 to 15 knots. Moving on to Tuesday, north winds 15 knots on the north coast, seas at about 5 to 6 feet, 6-foot seas with north winds 15 to 20 knots on the south coast. For Clarence Strait and the central inside waters, northwest winds at 10 knots with slight seas. Lynn Canal Glacier Bay variable to north winds at 10 knots with 2-foot seas. And for Prince William Sound, variable winds 10 knots, seas 2 feet. North Gulf Coast, variable winds at 10 knots. Cook Inlet, variable winds 10 knots with slight seas. But Kamishak Bay, much windier, small craft advisories there, west winds 30 knots with seas up to 9 feet, and Barren Island, small craft advisories, northwest winds 25 knots, seas 7 feet for Monday. And for Tuesday, those winds fall back for the Barren Islands to the northwest at 20 knots, Kamishak Bay coming down to 20 knots from the west, seas subsiding to 5 feet. Cook Inlet, variable winds 10 knots or less with slight seas, and Prince William Sound, slight seas with variable winds at 10 knots. North Gulf Coast, variable winds 10 knots, seas down to 3 to 4 feet. Kodiak Island, west-northwest winds 20 to 25 knots, 5 to 7 foot seas. And for the Alaska Peninsula, Bering Sea side, southeast at 15 knots, Pacific side, southwest 15, light winds for Bristol Bay out of the northwest at 10 knots. And for Tuesday, no change for Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, variable winds at 15 knots, Kodiak Island west-northwest 15 knots, seas 2 to 5 feet. Eastern Aleutians, southwest winds 20 knots. Central Aleutians, southwest winds 20 to 25 knots, and small craft advisories from Amchitka Island to Shemya for southwest winds 25 to 30 knots. Big increase in those winds on Tuesday with that stronger storm coming in. Gale warnings for the western and central Aleutians from Amchitka to Shemya, west-southwest 40 to 45 knots, south 35 knots for Adak and Atka. Fox Island, small craft advisories, south to southeast winds 25 to 30 knots with seas running 7 to 11 feet. Up along the southwest coast, winds will be southeast at 15 to 20 knots. Small craft advisories for the Pribilof, south winds 25 knots, southeast 30 knots for St. Matthew Island. Small craft advisory St. Lawrence Island for east winds at 25 knots. Yukon Delta coast, southeast at 20. And for the Tuesday outlook, light variable winds for Norton Sound with 2-foot seas, St. Lawrence Island, easterly breezes at 15 knots, and the Yukon Delta coast, southeast at 15, and a light northeast wind of 15 knots for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, south of Nunivak Island. But small craft advisories for St. Paul and St. George Island, east winds 25 knots. St. Matthew Island also small craft advisories for southeast winds at 30 knots with seas as high as 10 feet. And moving up to the Arctic coast, central and eastern Beaufort Sea coast, northeast breeze 10 knots. And for the west side, northeast winds 15 knots down to Cape Thompson to Wales, north winds at 15 knots. Outlook for Tuesday, very light winds from Wales to Cape Thompson at 5 knots or less, no wind. And from Cape Thompson up to Point Lay, northeast winds at 15 knots. And for the central and eastern Arctic coast, winds will be northeast 5 to 10 knots. Looking pretty good wind-wise up there. And lack of gradient's the reason there, so look for maybe some variable clouds like today up there, possible fog, but nothing too significant. And dry over the northern interior, chance of snow showers along the west part of the state down to the Kuskokwim Valley, western Alaska range. Isolated showers possible with a weak trough of the Kenai Peninsula into the Copper River Basin, and rain diminishing. That front washes out over the Panhandle, be slowly decreasing, and a front spreads wind and rain into the Pribilofs and eastern Aleutians tonight, and that moves to the Alaska Peninsula as the front weakens. Winds won't be much of a factor. Rain will be light, comes showery behind the front. Weak low south of the Kenai Peninsula keeps it showery over south central Alaska. Big storm comes in to the Bering Sea, bringing the gale force winds all the way to Adak and Atka, and fair along the way.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.